welcome to 2025's List Makers, episode 46, a spin-off, of course, of the Doctor Who show. I'm Dave.
I'm Rob. Hope you're all having a wonderful new year.
I hope you're all having a brilliant, hot, warm summer, or, a tolerable winter.
Yes.
This is episode 46 of the List Makers, top 5 stories that best use time. Ready for this one, Rob?
Absolutely, Dave. Can't wait.
I have an overarching comment to make about this one, but I'm going to save it until we get to our discussion. But I do have an overarching comment. I had lots of options for this one, but I've stuck to 5, and I will make my list.
Are we going to talk snaps?
This is one that could...
It could blow out, I think.
Yeah, like 5's not impossible.
Looking at my list, there's one on it where I'm like, Dave won't like that story.
Look. I know the way you do your list, Rob, and there's always one that I was like, well, of course I didn't have that one. So, yeah, okay, 4 is not impossible.
Okay, I'm going to say 2.
Yeah, I think there will be snaps. But we're wasting time.
We are.
Number 5, City of Death. This is a story that is all about time. It's about the Juggaroth Scaroth being splintered in time. It's about the Doctor going back in time to the Renaissance to change something that's going to happen in the future. Scaroth himself changes things in the past to affect the future. He's trying to build a machine that will take him back in time. Time permeates all the way through this story, and it does it in a really clever way. And I think it's just really, really clever, really, really subtle, but I absolutely had to have it in there at number 5. Number 4, I'm going with Day of the Daleks.
Yeah.
Because, again, we have a story that actually does function in 2 time zones, but it's not just the Doctor going back and forward between one time zone and the other. What happens in the future affects what happens in the past, which affects what happens in the future. And that time paradox, that wonderful moment of, you did it yourselves. I just think it's a wonderful thing to do, and it plays with the idea of time, and it uses time fundamentally. It's about time travel, and it's about the effects of one zone on the other. I think it's just a really cool use of time that didn't jump out at me at first when I was making the list, but when I saw it, I thought, yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
Speaking of 2 time zones, number 3, I'm going to the Davison era, Mawdryn Undead.
Nice.
This is a very rare use of time for the story in this era, but a very clever one. It is one where Peter Grimwade, as the writer, has very clearly, very carefully plotted out not just where each character is in each time zone, but how it goes through their particular life, but also where objects are. Where's the capsule? How does that get from one time zone to the other? Does it pass through? Where's the homing device? How does that go from one time zone to the other, and how does it affect it? How the Brigadier's memories of one time zone affect his actions in another time zone. And look, there are problems with Mawdryn Undead in some of the execution of it, but that fundamental idea of, again, having 2 time zones and having characters move between those time zones, having objects move between those time zones, and everything affecting it. And when you stop and actually plot out, where did the Brigadier go? Where did Turlough go? Where did the capsule go? It all works really, really well. It's very clever, and I'm surprised that the show hasn't done more of that.
Very good.
Number 2, I'm up to the Matt Smith era, and I'm going with Big Bang.
Okay.
Now, Big Bang is not a favourite story of mine. It's not from a favourite season of mine. I think that is very fair to say. But I can remember watching Big Bang go out at the time, and all the stuff where Smith is going back and forward in time, and he stops to grab the mop, and then he stops to grab the hat, and then he does this, and then he stops to use that. I just remember sitting there going, okay, this is quite brilliant.
Yeah.
It is complex, but easy to follow. It is entertaining and funny, but not to the detriment of the drama. It is absolutely, I think, some of the best of that Moffat-y, timey-wimey writing. And I think that, as I say, it's just stuck in my mind ever since I saw it, which was a long time ago now, just how clever and effective that use of time was. And so just for that little bit, I thought the Big Bang has to be right up there.
Nice.
Number 1, again, not a shock to long-time listeners of this podcast, one of my favourite stories. I'm going back to Hartnell, and I am, of course, going with The Ark. Probably the first really big proper use of time. Maybe the Space Museum, but I'll talk about that a bit later on, and why I disqualified that. But this idea that we actually see the consequences of the TARDIS crew's actions 700 years later, I think is phenomenal. I think that the way the cliffhanger does that is just one of the greatest cliffhangers in Doctor Who's history. That moment where they see the statue and it's been finished and you go, right, that means we've travelled forward 700 years and the head's a monoid. Okay, what's happened is really, really good. The way that legends play through from the first part of the story to the second part of the story is really, really clever. It's a fundamental use of the concept, not just of time, but of the TARDIS and the Doctor and his companions travelling in time and the consequences of that I think is just utterly, utterly, utterly brilliant. I love it. I could watch that story on a regular basis. The Ark is number one.
One snap, Dave.
One snap. I generally don't know which it could be. It could be any of them.
Yeah, could be.
What's your list, Rob?
All right, Dave. In at number 5, I've got the Ark.
There you go. That didn't last long. Didn't get the suspense there, Rob.
Now, this is coming from my point of view. I've got this as a very basic entree into this topic because it's not like something really tricky happens with time. The Doctor and his pals meet some people, see what's going down on the spaceship, and they leave. They come back to the spaceship, so much time has passed, and dun dun dun, we have that big moment with the statue. It's a really cool moment in the story and everything flows from there. But again, I find it's a very basic use of time travel, just going to the same place sometime later and something shocking has happened in the meantime. But I think it's a credit that even this old black and white 1960s story with alien creatures who look really silly with those Beatles wigs on, Dave, it still hits. It still works so well today. So I can't not have it on the list. But I put it in at 5. You put it in at 1.
There you go. That's our step.
Yeah.
So there's 4 completely different stories out there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
In at number 4, I've got Vincent and the Doctor. And I'm going to stay basic here because sometimes I've been reading history texts or even just watching a movie based on historical events and I've thought, what if I could go back and change something? Or what if I could go back and show X person that they'll be remembered hundreds of years later, even thousands of years later, and it could just be our little secret? What if you could go back and tell Alexander the Great, look, you're going to die next week, but you are remembered for all time? Would he be okay with that? I think about this at times, Dave. It keeps me up at night. And the Red Dwarf episode, Ticket to Ride, even has a spin on this where they convince JFK to assassinate himself. It's not as crass as it sounds, but he has to reset the timelines and he has to assassinate himself. You know, wild. And here, showing Van Gogh that he will be loved is such a beautiful moment, I think. I couldn't not have it.
I've got to say, Rob, I have seen Ticket to Ride, and whilst I agree it's not quite as crass as it sounds, it is almost as crass as it sounds.
Okay. In at number 3, I've got A Christmas Carol. In the old Dickens story, we had Scrooge visited by the spirits of past, present, yet to come. So how bloody obvious for Moffat, but how exciting that he took the idea and ran with it and gave it a timey-wimey twist. You know, we've got the grumpy Scrooge-like character. We have him dealing with issues in the present, obviously, like the crashing spaceship, but then we have his child version, his adult version, thanks to time travel. It's all in there, and rather than anything supernatural going on like in the Dickens story, it's all, again, thanks to time travel. So it's absolutely central to all of this story happening, full stop. And it's a story I've always had a real soft spot for, so it's elbowed its way in here to number 3. Sue me, I can be a bit of a sentimental softie sometimes, Dave.
Fair enough.
In at number 2, I've got Father's Day, and this was a favourite in Series 1. Did the penny just drop for you?
Yeah, sorry, yeah. I'm not interrupting. Go on.
Okay. It was a favourite for me from the moment I saw it. You know, the piece resonated with me from the companion asking to see her dad. I mean, that's what every companion would want, isn't it? If not to see a parent who has passed, then what about a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle or even a best friend or whatever? It's the most basic thing you could want when something's taken away. If you can go and get it back again, even for a little while, if you've got a time machine, it's just so very logical to want that. So on top of having a really solid, believable premise, when we also get to the paradox stuff and Rose's dad essentially has to kill himself to put the world to rights again, I think we're back in Ticket to Ride territory, Dave. There's something tragic and noble about that, and I think it's a really great ending to the piece. I love it.
Yep. Your number one.
In at number one, I've got World Enough and Time. And I couldn't see any way around not putting this at number one, Dave. I mean, to take the concept of time dilation and have it happening at the two ends of the spaceship and the problems that time causes in a general sense, I mean, that's one thing. But to layer in the genesis of the Cybermen, basically, and blow a big hole in the companion's chest and have two masters show up, I mean, this thing has it all, doesn't it? I mean, Moffat really pushed the boat out. And contractually, I'm obliged by the rules of this podcast to say it should have been Capaldi's final story. Can you imagine?
You are, yes.
I mean, I know you can imagine because we talk about it all the time. I think we talked about it on List Makers a few months ago. Capaldi would have gone down, I think much like Davo, of having an era of wildly varying quality, but an absolutely fantastic regeneration story, full stop. That's my list. I've got runners-up, but that's my list.
Yep, I've got runners-up as well, and one that I'm surprised didn't make both our lists. But the overarching comment I foreshadowed at the start of the podcast was, when this topic came out of the hat last month, I thought this is going to be one of the easiest topics we've ever had. Yeah. How hard is it going to be to find 5 of these? And then when I started going through the list of stories and started trying to pluck ideas out of my head, I thought, this is harder than I thought it was going to be. Because a show that's premised around the concept of time travel doesn't use time all that much and doesn't use time well much at all. And I actually did struggle to put a list together that I was really happy with. How did you find it, Rob?
It took me a while, but once I got on a roll, I got on a roll. And I think once I had the Ark at 5 and World Enough and Time at 1, I was thinking, okay, there's the basic one. You start in a place, get in your time machine and land back in that place, and things have changed. That's very basic. Through to World Enough and Time being time dilation. Things are happening. Bill has aged years while these people are still at the top of the spaceship wondering, will they go down in the elevator? That's fascinating. That's using time in a much more complex way. And then I just slotted some in between. I think once I got Father's Day in there and I had 3, I thought, oh my God, yeah, this is starting to flow. And again, I do have runners-up.
Well, let's hear your runners-up then, Rob.
For runners-up, I had Waters of Mars, with the Doctor really pushing the limits and trying to overrule a fixed point in time, and time basically bouncing back and killing the woman that he's saved. It's almost saying, nah, you're not having that. We're still killing her. Trial of a Time Lord, again, had the Dickens thing of past, present, and future. In terms of how it set the stories up. And I'll also throw in Blink, as the Angel's whole shtick is throwing you back in time and you die before you were born. And that's quite chilling. Didn't quite make the list, though, but yeah, uses time well, I think.
Yeah, look, my runners-up, I had the Daleks Master Plan, because that is using time as a weapon, which I think is a really cool concept, but it wasn't a big enough fundamental part of the story to have it on the list.
Not overall, no.
I had Invasion of the Dinosaurs, because, look, that's a cool story I love, and it is about bringing things back from the past and rolling back time. So I think that could have been very much in the list. That's probably the one I most regret not getting in there. Mm-hmm. And like you, I had Blink.
Yeah.
And I think that it was inevitable we were both going to have a Moffat story or 2 on our lists.
Yes.
In the end, I went with Big Bang. You went with World Enough and Time. And you also had Christmas Carol. And you also had Vincent and the Doctor from Moffat's era as well.
Yeah.
Blink could have fitted into either of our lists. If it was just that scene where they're watching the video that they write the script of that goes back in time so they can make the video. If it was just that scene, I think that would have been really, really high on the list. But it doesn't quite flow through the whole story quite enough to have got on the list for me.
Talking of Vincent and the Doctor, do you ever have those historical moments where you think, what if I could go back and, I don't know, tell Julius Caesar that he's, don't go to the Senate that day or something? Would you do it? Or if you did do it, would Caesar be quite stoic and go, well, if that's how history's going to work out, I've got to do it?
Yes, and it comes down to something you sort of started to talk about there, Rob. And we talked a little while ago about the motivation of villains and villainesses. We talked about that in the List Makers a couple of months ago. And that egomaniac, that megalomania to think that you should be the one that rules the world. But also, I think a part of all these dictators is that desire for immortality. That desire that even if they can't physically live forever, their presence and their memory will live forever. And I do wonder, yes, if you went back to Julius Caesar or Alexander the Great or Augustus or many of these people and said, look, you will live out a mortal life and die, but you will be immortal.
Yeah.
You will be remembered forever. Would that be what they wanted? Yeah, I think that's a fascinating fundamental question.
Yeah. Or is their interpretation of immortality even the same as ours? Because the world was just so different then. I mean, you think of today, we can get on a jet plane and go over, wherever we want in the world within a day. They couldn't.
And that's before we get into theological desires of what's in the afterlife, which...
Well, yes.
We're not going to go down that path in our 20 minutes. I mentioned, Rob, that I discounted the Space Museum. And that's because, look, whilst... there is that concept of jumping a time track that does happen to set up the premise of the show. I actually think it kind of wastes that premise. I think that even though they do the whole thing of, well, we've seen our future, now we have to change it, there isn't quite that sense of, well, we're going to do this thing and do this clever thing and that's going to happen. There's just this sort of very vague, well, look, we tried some stuff and, I don't know, maybe it worked.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite deliver on that concept of time in the way that I think the Ark does.
No, not at all. The arc is shocking when you have that moment. The dun-dun-dun moment. Yeah.
Yeah, and very, very different and very new. I mean, it was only 1966, I think the Ark was out.
Yeah. Yeah, no, fabulous. Fabulous stuff.
Father's Day is the one on your list that I heard and thought, bugger, I wish that was on mine.
Yeah, you had a reaction there and I picked up on it and I thought, that's funny. Thought,
Yeah, no, that's a really good pick, and you're right. It does land the emotion of having to fix the timelines really, really well. So I think that was really, really good. Christmas Carol.
Yeah,
I think if we're being very, very abstract and literal about good use of time, I think that's in there. I, however, don't like it because I can't get past the manipulative nature of the Doctor in that. There's something about that story that just sits really badly for me. It's not quite as bad as the Doctor grooming a young girl in another Moffat written story a couple of years earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But there is just something I find very, if not immoral, certainly unethical about the way the Doctor does it.
Do you like the Seventh Doctor when he manipulates people?
I think he manipulates them in a different way. He manipulates them in the here and now.
Okay.
Going back to change someone's personality to make them be the person you want them to be.
Yeah.
That to me sits very badly. And although there's a wonderful central performance in there, I do dislike that story and that concept just because just for me it just sits in a really awkward place.
So it's like the Doctor knows best. He's not leaving it up to people to make the change themselves.
Yeah, he's fundamentally changing the nature and the personality of someone to suit his selfish ends. I think that's problematic for me, to use a contemporary word.
Yeah, and that's a very fair way to look at it. I don't disagree with what you're saying at all.
No, and I totally get where you're coming from as well. Like, it hits emotionally really, really well, and it is very, very clever.
Oh, yeah, and then she sings the song at the end. Oh, my God, Dave. It's my heart.
Yeah, no, I was reaching for the volume control when that happened myself.
Oh,
so
Dave.
I think this is one of those stories we had very different encounters with, Rob. Okay. It's a shame we weren't doing hot takes when that was out.
Yeah, true.
But once again, look, I think it's worth saying a really, really strong spread here, right from the Hartnell era through most classic Doctors, a number of modern Doctors. Yes, there's a big emphasis on the Moffat era. I think that is just to be expected, given he's the guy who invented the concept of the timey-wimey plot. Yeah. But look, although it was hard, I think, to find really good examples for me, there are certainly good examples of the use of time through the whole of Doctor Who.
Yeah, definitely.
But we are running up against time.
We are.
So, where's my hat? Over here. For our next episode.
Mm-hmm.
Top 5 funny stories.
Funny stories?
Funny stories.
Funny stories. Okay.
Top 5 funny stories. Rob, if I don't speak to you before Australia Day, have a great Australia Day.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you. Let's sink some sink some adult beverages.
We'll do the summer stuff because it's summer down here. Thank you very much, Rob. I've been Dave.
I've been Rob.
And we'll keep making more lists next month.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.